Hi, team. This is George. Thanks for a fantastic week one. I appreciate all the effort and energy you put on the discussion boards and working through defining the topic that you're going to have. I'll have feedback on that today and tomorrow, most likely. So I just appreciate what it takes to do that. So let's jump in and kind of review week one. And as we review week one, after we review week one, we'll jump into a little bit of week two. Week one was kind of interesting because we jumped in directly into research. And the first part of research is defining what type of research you want to do and the topic that you want to research. So you have to find the topic and define how you want to be able to do it. That's why we had the four categories: experimental, non-experimental, single subject, and survey, because that's important. That's one of the most important pieces of your research when you do start research is what do you want to do and how are you going to do it? It kind of makes sense to do that. So part of learning how to research in our class was for the first week, figuring out, defining, and researching ourselves on what the four or on what the different categories that we chose were placed into the different topics, how they all fit together. So that was part of the research process. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I'm going to go over it just after we talk about our discussions. In our discussions, what I appreciate, and let me get there, my apologies. The human factor, we had to basically be an advocate for mom and help her define what would be best for her, help her figure everything out, because so often we found, and there were so many good comments in here, that when what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for everybody. That's why we have to have research, and especially when there's different demographics. You have a senior citizen and a senior citizen female and a much younger male who are both diagnosed with depression, and will the same things work? That's where research comes in, because as everyone pointed out so well, no, it doesn't always work that way. So I appreciate everybody and the effort that they put into that. And let's jump back here. So the project category. So here's a quick overview of those that you probably know very well by now. So experimental, if you're in the experimental group, you manipulate the variables and subjects to identify a cause and effect relationship. So if I do this to my variable, will this happen to my other variable? Will this happen to my dependent? So if I do something here, will it cause this? And we want to be able to say yes or no. That's what our experimental will do. Non-experimental is you can't manipulate the predictor variable. The researcher is going to rely more on interpretations. So how I can't physically go in and make changes. So this happens a lot in case studies, things like that. But you can make predictions on and draw conclusions from the different observations and things like that that you can make from that study. So single subject, use a single subject as its own control. So in other words, if I'm having a study, I'm not going to compare this whole group to this whole group. I'm going to compare the results of each individual to themselves. So that's what a single subject is. Survey is you use a questionnaire, you use a survey. And let's take a quick look. I thought I had them up already. My apologies for that. So let's get them up right now. Week one. So I wanted to look at all of the different we're getting there, sorry. Topics, there we go. Sorry for the delay. Learning in color experiment. Could the color paper used in a test assignment have an impact on academic performance? Creating a assignment or test placed on different color paper and test for change in relationship, change related to paper to the color paper. So we're manipulating a variable. So that's very good to show an experimental type, because you're manipulating the color of the paper on purpose. Could this also be a single subject? Well, let's look. What's the definition of a single subject? If I compare Remember this? My apologies. There we go. What's the definition of a single subject? Single subject as its own control. So you can still have manipulation, but you want to compare the individual results to their own results. So it could be single subject as well. Just kind of depends on how you approach it. Information in short-term memory, how much memory can be stored in short-term memory. Participants are given increasing amounts of information that they must recall. That looks like that's going to be a really, really good single subject or experimental as well. Why? Because we can grade them to themselves, but it's also an experiment because you are manipulating the variable. Excuse me. Personality, music preference. What do we think that one would be if we're going to measure a person's taste in music, offer hints about their personality? This one, we can go through a lot of different parts and pieces with it. If you look here, sorry, is it experimental? Are we going to manipulate anything? It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like you're trying to just gather information. So that could very much be non-experimental. You could also use a survey, and you can also possibly make it a single subject. But I know non-experimental or survey, because there's no way you can manipulate the variable. That's just basically getting their feedback. Gender and short-term memory. Does gender have any influence on it? You can focus on a variety of different research questions, such as whether boys or girls are better for remembering specific types of information. So this one leaves us wide open. So what are we going to do here for gender and short-term memory? Well, can this be an experimental? Absolutely, because we can manipulate a variable. Can it be non-experimental? Can we just go in and gather data of things that have already happened? Yes, we can. Could it also be single subject? Can we not manipulate the control? That's possible. Could we also use a survey? You could. All depends on how you create the question that you're going to use. So there are some that we can use on multiple project categories. So in the one that where is that one? Reaction to violated social norms. And that wasn't the one I was looking for. I'm sorry. Gender and psychological reaction to a specific noise. Do men and women have varying psychological reactions to specific noises? This experiment evaluates this question by comparing test subjects' reactions to different types of sounds. Now here's an interesting one. Manipulates variable subject to identify a cause and effect relationship. You're not really looking for a cause and effect. You're looking for something different. Cannot manipulate the predictor variable. Research relies more on interpretations or observations to come to a conclusion. So that one fits wholeheartedly in the non-experimental section. Does it mean that leads us to the conversation? Does it mean that non-experimental is worth less? Absolutely not. Non-experimental is very appropriate for many situations, because there's sometimes where we cannot manipulate, or we do have to rely on interpretation and observation. So those are just a few, and I'm going to go through each one that everybody picked within the topics themselves and give you feedback today and tomorrow. So it looks, for the most part, everyone is right on track. So I appreciate all that you've done to do that, to maintain being on track. Week 2, prep for week 2. Now, our big project this week, we have our category, we have our subject this week. You're going to be preparing for week 3. In week 3, you're going to have to turn in your IRB form and your informed consent overview this week. So as you do this is just going to be reading and reading is what that's going to end up being. So this week, the writing piece is going to be our annotated bibliography. Say that 10 times fast. And what that is, there's sometimes confusion on what an annotated bibliography is. So what you're going to do is, this site right here is an excellent source. I'm going to put that in the announcement as well. But annotated bibliography is you're going to have your sources. So you're going to have your research sources. So what are you going to use to create your framework to say, yes, what I'm doing is supported? And you're going to write 1 to 2 paragraphs of what the source is, what it's all about, and why and how it helps support your topic, your experiment, your research study that you're going to complete. So if you are doing reaction to violated social norms, you need to look up different peer-reviewed or credible articles. Textbooks are fine as well on people's reaction to violated social norms. And then you're going to see what supports the research you're doing and how you're going to take it a little bit further. So you'll look up your sources, write 1 to 2 paragraphs. In the website here at Purdue OWL, they have an excellent explanation of exactly what should be in the couple of paragraphs. So go there, and if you follow that, it's going to just be very simple. Sometimes we like to make things like annotated bibliographies a little more complicated than they are. So let's just go there, look exactly, that's part of our research too, look exactly what the Purdue OWL says, and then put your annotate your source. So your reference source will be APA style. So whatever that is for the journal or wherever you get your supporting documentation from, and then write the 2 paragraphs up according to the way the Purdue OWL talks about it. So that's part of your research. I'm not going to go completely into the annotated bibliography because you want to go to that website, just take a look. And during the middle of the week, I will post another video. And if there's any questions, I'm very easy to get a hold of via email or cell phone, 760-912-9242, or G. Hanshaw at uc.apu.edu. So please feel free to get a hold of me at any time. And I appreciate all the effort you're putting forth in class. And let's have some fun with this research, because research is fun. Thank you.